So let's see what we can, let's see what's happening today that can be interpreted a couple of different ways. And I want to look at it from the perspective, of course, of the flood, which of course is nonsense to, almost everyone out there. But man, this planet is, the human race is unstable and the planet underneath its feet is unstable as well. We were talking about the Grand Canyon last week and whether this little river right here that you see right here, actually this one, carved out the Grand Canyon. And you can just see by that image right there, the problem in trying to, the severe problem in trying to account for that geological formation from that flowing body of water over a very extended period of time of millions of years. Because that right there is a sheer carving. It's a carving straight down. And I didn't actually put up the Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens Canyon. Is this dangerous? Do I have safe search on strict? I probably should. And I don't know why Brave DuckDuckGo wants to be so slow. What's up with that? Google Grand Canyon, Mount St. Helens. Thank you. Yeah, let's just go to images. Yeah, so these formations here, they just say it. These formations are younger than you. They're younger than me. I don't know if they're younger than you. They're younger than you if you were born after about 1982 or something like that, 1983. I forget when the second eruption was. But some of these formations are extraordinary in how they picture. Wait, what happened right there? This oh, there's one right there. Look at that one right there. Go. Huh? What's going on with this internet? Oh. That didn't really help. Well, you can get the idea. These, they just said it straight up. These canyons were formed by, right there's a good example of it, right there. Rapid carving out. So the lava went down. Excuse me, the lava eroded out as it came down, as the pyroclastic flow came down, I think. And it filled hundreds of feet into this valley or whatever. And then and then it hardened, or it settled and then it hardened, all these sediments. And then the second flow happened sometime later and hit that and just carved out of what had previously been laid down, these canyons. And it's like this little image of the Grand Canyon, but it happened in a matter of a couple of years. And really a matter of hours, because the first flow happened and then it was done. And then the second flow happened and then it was done.
And even all those layers didn't take millions of years.
No, that's right. That's exactly right. So let's see if those are images. Anyway, that's Mount St. Helens. So all of this is, that's just a great picture of it right there, isn't it? 600 feet high, I think, and down. 600 feet worth of sediment and layer, and then it settles into layering, and then here comes the carving out, and you get something like this. It's really extraordinary. And so the question is that the explanation for this? And my response is, man, if you can recreate this effect in your own lifetime, that's pretty good explanation, right? Or you can go with the difference is catastrophic erosion or gradual erosion. And does this more reflect catastrophic erosion, which we can now see, or gradual erosion, which we can also see? But gradual erosion doesn't produce the sheer carve that you see right here. Those tend to be very angled, very angled erosion the systems of erosion. So that's really interesting to me.
My question is, when it continues, if it actually, this river eroded, would this river be continued to erode?
Yes.
If it's never.
Well, they're gonna say over millions of years, you'd never see it in your lifetime. But you just have to imagine that the base down here would be doing the same thing, even if it's a foot or two or 3 feet, you would have to see the same thing.
Very rapid.
Yeah, but that's just not how riverbanks work. This is happening all over the country in every single river. That's not the way riverbanks work. Anyway, as far as the layering goes, you can see, I mentioned last week about the seams. You can't see the age. You can't see the gradual sedimentary layering. And let me try to find one where that's a really, no, it's too far down. Back up here. You can kind of see it in this one, where you've got these vertical, these horizontal lines. That's catastrophic erosion traveling in one way. And it carves out the seam, it carves out the layers, so you get a cross section of it, a snapshot of it. But there's these other ones. Look at this. River? Kidding me. You can see it very clearly here. The idea would be these layers were put down gradually over millions of years. But if that's the case, how do you explain this seam right here? One layer is 10 million, well, however many millions of years old, and the next layer above it is millions of years less old than that. And then another one millions of years after. That's what you're up against if you try to explain it like that. But then there's this thing called, let's look at a couple of other ones. Look at this. Just incredible. Then there's this one particular phenomenon called the Great Unconformity, which is a really, really stark example of this right here, where you have one layer and then another layer right on top of it. And these seams go virtually horizontal, like this. They don't undulate, they don't do that sort of thing. They go virtually horizontal. And this one here is really, really striking, so much so that they call it the Great Unconformity. See if there's another image of it that's really good. But the point is, you can with the Grand Canyon, you can literally go down and see 10,000 feet into the earth and what it looks like. And it just doesn't look like what you would expect if we're talking about millions and millions of years of gradual layering of sedimentation. And then millions and millions of years after that of a body of water slowly flowing and carving it out. It just doesn't look like that. We talked last week about frauds, hoaxes with regard to skeletons and ancestors and so forth. This is the one I was thinking of. There's others. We talked about them, but this is Piltdown Man. It's well understood. It's discovered, and it was claimed in 1910s, and then it was discovered to be a fraud in the 1950s. But this is an example of seeing what you want to see and not second guessing it. You just, you so want that to be true. That's how I see this. In fact, he may have, there it is right there. The guy who, I forget the guy's name, Woodward, right here. His claims were eagerly and uncritically endorsed by some prominent English scientists, perhaps because the Piltdown fossil suggested that the British Isles had been an important site of early human evolution. So twice-fold, seeing what you want to see. Number one, evolution, confirmation. Number two, of the importance of your own people. So that's exactly when you got to watch out. But then they discovered that it was what happened was they took remains of more than one thing and they combined it, if I understand it, and claimed that it was another species of human. And these remains were up to a kilometer apart, 1.3 kilometers, which you're getting close to a mile. apart, but they just put them together. And said, hey, a new human, a new kind of human, a subspecies of human or something like Homo erectus or whatever. So that's Piltdown Man. And then, of course, everybody's happy to fill in the blanks for the rest of the skeleton. And then people write PhD dissertations on it. They make their name, all this stuff, and then it all proves to be fake. Here's I watched a documentary on the Earth's core, which you two would like. Some of which, a lot of which, most of which I didn't really know. But this is this is an image of the Earth's core. That we're talking about the instability of planet Earth because of, in my view, the flood. That's the point. And if you imagine a stable planet prior to Genesis chapter 3, and then God simply destabilizes the planet however he did that, which you see in Genesis chapter 6 or chapter 7 as the fountains of the great deep were opened. Boy, a lot was done in opening the fountains of the great deep. And so you end up with whatever it was before, you end up with this structure afterwards. And so the assumption would be this is always what the Earth's core looked like, or the ground underneath our feet. And I just don't know how you can make that assumption.
Show the fountains of great deep.
No, but we did talk about that vast body of water down there that's 3 times the volume of all the oceans combined. So if you can imagine that that was unleashed, we would do it all over again. But is this the way, it's uniformitarianism or not? Is it the processes we see in effect today and that we can replicate today have always been in place or not? Because if not, then all bets are off on what happened when they were different. So you just make this assumption, in my view, that they were always the same. I can't prove they weren't. You can't prove they were. You just have to assume it to do your science, or you think you do. And so, you have the iron core, which is superheated, 8,000 degrees Celsius, Fahrenheit or something like that, which means it should be molten, but the pressures are so great, it becomes a solid again. It's the weirdest thing. But anyway, this core rotates, but it rotates at a different, what do you call that? Velocity? Is that the right word? Than the planet does. And sometimes the core will reverse itself, which happens fairly frequently. But anyway, the point is, because of the dynamic here, the interior of the Earth produces a magnetic field. That's absolutely essential for the existence of life on planet Earth, because it's this magnetic field that protects the Earth from radiation from the sun and other solar radiation. It's remarkable. This is fine-tuned. I mean, it's a seething, what seems like a seething ball of instability, core of instability with volcanic eruptions and earthquakes and everything and plate tectonics. But it's this delicate thing that unless it produces, for example, this magnetic field, we don't exist, because it all get hit by this lethal radiation from the sun and probably other places. So to me, that's just amazing. So the magma then forms or is in below the Earth's crust and down into this layer right here, the outer core. So the mantle on the outer core. And then every once in a while, because of the instability, it pops out and erupts, and that then becomes a volcano. And now that it has an opening, it'll just keep doing that. And so that's what produces things like the Ring of Fire. This is the Ring of Fire that I mentioned a week or two ago. And it's this geological structure and phenomenon accounts for 75% of all volcanoes in the world. And so you can see what's on the Ring of Fire. Japan, Hawaii, and we go around here. Oh, look at this right here. Mount St. Helens, the San Andreas Fault. Whoops, where are we at here? Right down here. All of those things are a consequence of the Ring of Fire, this unstable I don't know, joint, seam between plates, tectonic plates or something like that. It's just extraordinary. And so every once in a while, a lot of action underneath the ocean. Here's the Mariana Trench, right here. The deepest point in the ocean, 37,000 feet, 38,000 feet. There's 5,280 feet in a mile. We're talking over 7 miles. No skeletal, no bony structures down there. I don't think. Only soft tissue. The animals look completely different, really weird in some cases. As you go down, eventually there's just no bony structures. But what was I saying? So you have these the ocean floor is very, very unstable. And so every once in a while, you'll have these earthquakes on the ocean floor, which has a lot of volcanoes. And those earthquakes produce massive disruptions, which displace massive amounts of water, from which we get tsunamis in the Pacific Ocean, which the Ring of Fire rings. And so one of those was Indonesia, over here, in 2004, which you may remember. I was hunting this down. This is the power. So the way you have an earthquake on the ocean floor, some number of miles out, produces this extraordinary tonnage of, if you measure explosions in tons of TNT, like one of the 2 bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, one of them was 20,000 tons of TNT, and they measure the strength of it with that. But these ginormous, unleashes an enormous amount of power, energy, which displaces all this water, which has to go somewhere at extraordinary speeds, 400 miles an hour. These waves will travel like this in the water, traveling like that as this happens. And eventually they're going to hit land. And when they hit land, that doesn't happen all at once. There's a slope. So as this 400-mile-an-hour wave hits the slope and folds in on itself, it slows down and increases in height until you end up with these walls of water. And that's what happened in Indonesia in 2004. I remember watching this thing unfold at the time. You can go on YouTube, and you can also see the one in Japan in 2011, where the Fukushima nuclear plant got hit. It's just enormous, the amount of power, simply from the instability of the ground underneath our feet, and even more so on the ocean floor. But watch this thing unfold as the interior of the earth lets its presence be known. They didn't know it was coming. Everybody's swimming. You can just see them all of a sudden in some of the videos running away from the water. There's people driving down the road, and then here comes the water. And it just keeps coming and coming and coming. It's just enormous volumes of water. So where do you hide? I should make this bigger. Kind of hard to see. Oh, it is very hard to see. I mean, where do you go to hide? You're on that road over there. And it's, I don't remember how many people died in this one. It was 250,000 or some number like that. I was watching videos where there's people filming because there's nothing they can do on a balcony at a hotel or something. And remember, it's not just the water, right? That's good enough. It's not just the water. It's also, everything the water takes with it.
Oh, the debris.
The debris and the cars and the trucks, everything demolishes whole buildings and takes this. So now you're in the water with that. So there's no place to go. And you just see these people float by, never to be seen again. All because of the instability underneath the Earth's crust. All way, way down there. We're talking about the ocean floor caused this. This was a disruption in the ocean floor. So, these waves start out at 4 or 5 feet, moving hundreds of miles an hour, but they extend down. Of course, the wave of water is like this, and then here comes the gradual upslope, and then it does this, and the water folds in on itself. Because the water in the back is still going at 400 miles an hour. The water in the front is suddenly going 35 miles an hour. And so it usually just keeps piling up and piling up. It's incredible. In my view, this is what we're looking at as a consequence of the fountains of the great deep being disrupted and God breaking the earth with and bringing about an unstable situation that continues to this day. So I don't know exactly what history, what redemption looks like, how the earth will be redeemed, but this is going to get fixed.
Mhm.
That's my own opinion.
It's interesting to think about the instability that Noah and his family must have felt on the ark. It wasn't just that the ark all of a sudden just goes like this, but as the fountains
Yes,
erupted.
When it first
there
hits,
had to be
yeah.
some great instability.
yeah, I mean, it's a supernatural,
Weren't they Dramamine?
the supernatural hand of God. Then you got the supernatural hand of God.
And why didn't that thing capsize?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, it's just,
Then after this all happens, there's a new world down there. Did anybody see the movie Waterworld? I actually like that movie. I own that movie. But you know, there's a new world down there. There's an old world down there in that case, and then I guess the parallel. But anyway, they've all learned how to live on the water. I don't think they ever say in that movie what caused the delusion. But here, it's there. It's an entirely new world of instability and harshness that will reveal itself as the waters recede. So it's not like the waters recede and reveal a beautiful new world that they can now inhabit in peace and prosperity and tranquility. That's not going to happen. So that's, I don't know. Is that all a result of the flood? Seems to make sense. If you buy into the flood, it's not hard to buy into, you know, accounting for many of the geological phenomena that we see around us in terms of the consequence of the flood. All right, so that's the flood. When we left off the last time, we were at the water prevailing for 100 on the earth 150 days. And so now we're going to turn the page on the flood, like a new chapter, like a sequel, almost, to a movie or something. And you fast forward some amount of time and you pick up the ark. And it's just there on an ocean, we're in a world of water. It's Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 and 2, but with light. Although my hunch is that in chapters 1 and 2, it was a watery chaos. It was inhospitable. It was inhospitable even on the surface. That's my hunch. It was more like you know, one of the gas giants, Jupiter or something like that. That's my hunch. Only it's not gas. But anyway, so yeah, the analogy doesn't work. I'm over 2 this morning on analogies. Let's see. All right, let's go ahead and continue then. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark, and God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. Also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained, and the water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of 150 days, the water decreased. So it builds and builds and builds for 150 days, and then it begins to recede, but there's no land yet visible. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. If that's the same one as we know about, then it will be Turkey. The water decreased steadily until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. And in this case, did those mountains exist before this event? Or did mountains come to being when God upset the whole thing? And in that process, we see everything is turned topsy-turvy, and now you have mountains and valleys and jagged this and, you know, weird that, and we've carved out, we're gonna carve out, we have or are carving out canyons like the Grand Canyon or something like that.
It is just good to remember, I think, that this was written, as we reminded ourselves a number of times, by Moses. Pentateuch by Moses, who knew of mountains. Because the time you get to Moses, you have mountains.
Mount, yeah.
Now, whether or not they were before in Adam and Eve's day, we don't know. But Moses is writing out his life experiences.
Yeah, based on the way these things look, they look like the result of a catastrophe. I don't know. Huh. What is with the search? I can get to I can get to a website quick, but the search just spins and spins and spins, so I guess we're not gonna do that. But I don't think I'm having that problem at home. Did we start the routers to the DNS? Okay, we'll do that after this. All right. There's that key phrase. Chapter 8, verse 1, God remembered. And usually when God remembers, it's the result is that he snatches victory from the jaws of defeat. And he's usually remembering something that he promised that he would do. And so in this case, remember chapter 6, kite can't be reached. Remember, that's duck, go then.
Seems like.
Covenant. What was the covenant with, what is the covenant of Noah? I will establish my covenant with you, and you shall enter the ark. So what is the covenant? We tend to think of it as a covenant with all mankind, because in chapter 8, there's going to be God's statement about what will not cease. And we assume that the covenant then is, that's him stating the covenant. And we call that the covenant with Noah. That works for me. But he never directly connects this covenant with that promise in chapter 8. But anyway, he says here he's going to establish a covenant with you. And I think the covenant, as far as this goes, is I'm going to keep you through this deluge, through this catastrophe, and pick you up on the other side. So when he remembers Noah, that's him keeping, that's him keeping his covenant promise. Right there, he fulfilled his covenant promise. In a very real sense, what he covenanted with, his covenant of chapter 6, reached its fulfillment right here. And then there will be this extension in verse 22, where he's going to make a promise to himself that will affect the whole human race and the earth underneath our feet. So you'll see, for example, in Exodus chapter 2, actually the result of another covenant. He's going to make a covenant in chapter 15 with Abraham. And then you're going to see it here, which we'll get to later, so we won't look at it right now. 24 and 25. So God heard their groaning while they were in Egypt. God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw, there's that language again. In same author, very similar literary style, right? In chapter 6, 7, 8, God looked upon, God saw this and that. Here you see it again. God saw the sons of Israel and looked upon the sons of Israel and their torment, and he noticed them. He took notice of them. Exact same thing is going on right now with notice. He might as well have said it. God remembered Noah, took notice of him, and so on and so forth. Psalm 98, verses 2 and 3, the Lord has made known his salvation. You're seeing it right here, both times. Exodus early chapters of Exodus, that was salvation. That's the Savior in action. Here, chapter 8, that's the Savior in action. So this idea of the Savior and salvation, we tend to constrain it to Jesus and sins. We have a Savior demonstrating his saving nature all the way through the Old Testament. Never stops, which finally reaches its apex in salvation in Christ, where it's taken to a new level. But the Lord has made known his salvation. He has revealed his righteousness in the sight of the nations. He has remembered his loving kindness and his faithfulness to the house of Israel because of his covenant promise. All the ends of the earth have seen the salvation of our God. Or maybe it's will see the salvation of our God. I don't know. Hebrew did not have verb tense, past, present, and future, like English does. Even in Greek, it can be ambiguous. Past, present, and future in Greek doesn't refer to the past time or the present time or the future time necessarily, but a kind of action. And in English, it becomes explicit. You have to know whether in English, when you say this will happen, you mean in the future. This did happen, you mean in the past. This is happening, you mean in the present. Very explicit language. These languages were not like that. Anyway, you see this wind passing over. Right, what verse is the wind? Oh, sorry, yeah, right there. Same word, is that the same word? I don't think that's the same word. As the Spirit of God hovered over the surface of the water. That's ruah, which means wind or spirit. I think this is a different word. But you get the same sense about it, right? Is this hovering? God is hovering over the thing and about to do something, and the result will be in this instance a virtue. What's that? It is son of a gun. The same word. That's another parallel, another callback to Genesis chapter 1. You can't miss it. And the result is going to be a virtual act of recreation with a different earth underneath it, albeit a more unstable one. All the rest of the beings in the ark are going to benefit from God's covenant with Noah. So you see here this corporate solidarity idea again. With Adam's sin, all the human race will pay the consequence. Will reap the consequence for that. And in this case, through in a sense Noah's righteousness, the rest of the human race, and more specifically, the other 8 souls and all the animals will reap the benefit of God's promise to Noah. You have another callback here, right? The fountains of fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky that were opened in chapter 6 are now closed, and the result of the closing is separation will happen again. So remember, one of the defining elements of chapter 1 and the act of creation is separating. God separated the light from the darkness. Let's go back and look at it. I'll be right with you as soon as I learn how to spell the word separated. All right. So there you can see it, right? Light from darkness, the waters from below with the waters from above. He's going to differentiate the animals. There's other synonyms, I think, here for separating, but now he eliminated the separating, and everything just comes back together. With the waters come back together, there is uniformity. And now he's going to separate waters from waters, and then you'll see a new creation, if you will. They were opened in 7:11. and they were closed here. And right there's that word. So we, literally the same literary structure. I wrote down that in the ancient Near Eastern myth, the way the pagan nations thought of it, the end of the flood is caused by the sun god, but no mention is made of the sun in the halting of Noah's flood. So there's no physical, there's no gods. There's simply the Almighty, and there's no physical. Remember, in ancient Near Eastern religious systems, the gods were personified in the physical elements of creation: sun, moon, animals, stars, and so forth. And so you have to, when you talk about these events happening through the hand of a god, you're going to end up talking about it happening through the hand of a physical phenomenon, or it's in the hands of a physical phenomenon. And in their case, it's the sun god, the greatest of the gods. But in this, there is none of that. There is no mention of the rest of the created order in this. There is simply the covenant God of Israel. And Lord is going to reappear here somewhere. We'll talk about that later. Okay, in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested. Interesting choice of words. Upon the mountains of Ararat. Rested is the name Noah means rest. So that's the same word here, Noah Noad, on the mountains of Ararat. And the word rested matters. Not came to a stop, not crash landed, none of that, but rested. So he brought this disaster in, if you can imagine, for a soft landing. And this vulnerable, fragile ark built by a man survived the year, floating on the sea. We don't know how rough that sea was. And then when the time came, it didn't just careen down. It didn't end in some disaster for the ark, but it came to a nice, soft landing, like a well, it's even softer than a parachute. I mean, think about how soft it would have to be in order for the ark not to just get upended and get obliterated on the side of what it hit.
And how did the ark end up exactly at that point? That's a God thing.
There's that, yes. Did it just wander around till it hit something, or?
And yeah.
Yeah.
And I can picture, when I was in Germany, I can't remember if it was at one of the military, bases or if it was at, double stack McDonald's in Darmstadt, I can't remember. But they had a picture on the wall, and it had the earth and it had a hand like this, holding on to the earth. God's, picture of God's hand holding on to the earth. And I can just picture during this whole time, God doing the same thing with the ark.
Yeah.
He might not be from the bottom, might be from the top, but,
If you can imagine his hand underneath it.
Mhm.
he's just guiding it all the way through, wherever, to the point where God said, okay, I'm gonna bring you down to this, the waters you see over the mountains, over the earth. And he just kind of stops it right where he wants it to
Yeah.
stop.
For those of you who have flown, I mean, you've landed in airplanes that had a rough land, that had a harsh landing. Most of that's not in the hands of the pilot because it depends on wind shear and stuff like that. But then every once in a while you get one of those landings where you were sleeping and you hardly even woke up, or you woke up on the ground. That's the soft landing.
They greased the landing.
Yeah, that's what he hit, the soft landing right here. Yeah,
I almost like to read that, the ark nested
Mm.
yeah, that's good.
That's good.
upon the mountains there.
Yep. But he's not out of the woods yet, no pun intended. Uh, that was not deliberate. Not out of the water yet. So yeah, I mean, you can, he hits they hit the ground. Now what? They're locked inside. What do we do? Was there communication with God? You know, you have stuff that you have to speculate on. But this drying out process is going to continue for a while. God is in no hurry. And it's going to continue until the 10th month. So it starts, is that the 7th month? 150 days?
How are the months
Seven.
counted? Are they counted from the beginning of the flood?
I think so. 7th month, I would assume that that's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And the
Okay, I
7th,
didn't
because it's
know.
going to end up being exactly one solar year. They're, when they finally leave, it's going to be exactly one solar year. But it's a 10th month that the mountains become visible, that the mountains, probably from the vantage point of Noah, before the mountains are going to become visible. So you're definitely not thinking you're safe yet on the ground if you're Noah and the people in it. And look at how you're looking at this first from God's perspective. Got a narrator talking, and he's looking in the mind of God, and you can see that in verse 1. God remembered Noah. As it happens, you can see God remembering Noah, and so on and so forth. And then God did something, and now we switch from Noah to Noah's perspective, where he's, you know, from the vantage point of the ark, they're sitting there now, and the water steadily recede, and it's just sitting there, and it's just sitting there, and it just keeps going. And then 3 months later, finally, the tops of the mountains become visible from their perspective, or now you're just hearing from the narrator. Could Noah see that the tops of the mountains were visible? Or you just this knowledge that Noah's not aware of? Because as far as I can tell, he's just sitting in that ark doing nothing until he's told to do something. Or I don't know. I have no idea. This is all you get. But it's slowed down now, like it did with it's a very slow narrative. Remember, the whole thing is not going to start until the whole thing starts in Genesis chapter 6, verse 5, with the great statement of human depravity. And it will continue on until the end of chapter 8. So it winds down to maximum entropy, and then it winds back up again to some level of order. But it will never again reach the great statement in Genesis chapter 6, and God saw, and behold, it was very good. That pristine situation. It's not going back to that. We have a different world underneath our feet, and we have different humanity. Everything is different, except for the God who created it, who is now going to make a promise.
When verse 6 says it came about at the end of 40 days. 40 days from when? From verse 5, when the tops.
From
of
the 10th month,
What?
from the 10th month,
Yeah.
did he see that the tops of the mountains were visible? And so 40 days after that, I don't know that it matters, but that's a way of reading it, unless you have an opinion about it.
As soon as it stopped raining.
Unless you were told not to, or unless you were so terrified. Maybe you tried that early. You said, okay.
It's not a good idea.
Well, I mean, basically, the rain and opened up water split for 40 days. And then it talks about 150 days more after the rain stopped. And I'm sure that they didn't have any problems not knowing that the rain had stopped. I'm sure they could hear the rain pounding that ark very, very heavily. And so when all of a sudden that 40 days got done and stopped, I'm sure it was calm. And it was all they did was explode for another 150 days. So that ark eventually receded down to the top of the Mount Ararat.
They got 6 more months to go,
Yes.
a little less than 6 months.
But still, that just tells you how long it took that water to totally recede. before the dad said, okay, it's time for you to leave the ark.
And I think it's interesting that God does not overrule the forces of nature. God could have instantly dried it up as he did when his children passed through the Red Sea.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, but here he chose to allow the forces of nature. How soggy was that ground? You know, how long did it take? The wind came and
From the vantage point of Moses, that's a very interesting parallel between the waters at the sea and that magnificent display and the waters here, and that probably could not have been lost on
almost.
the generation, on Moses or the generation that read this. And so, you know, he split the sea in Exodus chapter, what, after 12, whatever that is, 13 or whatever number, whatever it is. He split the sea there and held back restrained waters. And now,
And caused the seabed to be dry.
right, but now he's also going to restrain here, right? Calworth, I mean, cause the wind to pass over and the rain, and the sky was restrained right here. And then it's gonna, like Tom said, now it's gonna be a natural process of the waters draining somewhere. Somehow they're going somewhere, I don't know.
Well,
But,
is it because the ground is coming up at that point, and we
What's moving around,
have to make the water drain into the ocean.
maybe that's a part of what's going on for a year. This stuff is still moving around and still happening and settling and so on and so forth. And it's not done yet. It's still happening. I have no idea, but that's my hunch that what we're seeing is a physical phenomena like earthquakes, volcanoes, typhoons,
So there's probably still tsunamis.
you know, so on and so forth, settling some kind.
I mean, I kind of picture when they got out the yard and they see all these dead bodies that got destroyed.
That raven.
They covered up to as time went down, all these bodies were covered with dirt,
There were certainly still fish,
right?
so there were assuming
Right.
that
Well-
the fish are like we would know them, so there are certainly predators in
But I'm
the
just saying,
bodies.
If you-
though, it's, you know,
snack.
If
there was a
you,
lot of human beings on the surface at that time,
if you see,
you know.
if you see these disasters now where floods happen, they're buried in the flood,
Mhm.
in the dirt, in the muck. There, you don't see them all laying on the surface. They're buried down in the muck.
Yeah.
All right, it's 10:15. I don't know if I should have talked about all this stuff at the beginning, but I did. So I forced you to be interested in what I'm interested in, whether I sounded intelligent or not. All right, we'll sign off. Thanks for joining over Zoom, everyone. Appreciate it. Nate, Naomi, and Stacy, and Gabe, and Cody, if you're there.
Bye, Gary. Thank you.
Yep. See ya.
For the last week in a row.
Thank you.
Yeah, Nate.
If you can't.